Now recognize Ms. Malliotakis from New York for 5 minutes of questions.
Dr. Anderson, do you believe that the former CDC director, Dr. Redfield, is a conspiracy theorist? Yes or no? Yes or no?
I think to the question of whether the former director is a conspiracy theorist is not really something I have thought about. So
Well, I
I
don't
don't
know,
like
because
to
you
label
just accused
people as such.
everyone who believes that there was a lab leak to be a conspiracy theorist. And back in March, the former director of the CDC, Dr. Redfield, came before this committee, and he said that it was not scientifically plausible that the virus went from a bat to humans and subsequently became one of the most infectious viruses in history. When asked why he was excluded from the February conference call that both of you, as well as 10 other scientists, had with Dr. Fauci, Dr. Redfield told us that Dr. Fauci wanted a single narrative surrounding the origins of COVID. But both you and Anderson Gary also expressed concerns about the genetic makeup of the virus just days before the initial draft of this paper came out. So were you both conspiracy theorists at that time? On January 29, 2020, Dr. Fauci emailed you after you had expressed concerns to him on a phone call that you believed COVID would have been engineered. He told you that if this was true, you had to contact the FBI. You did not do that, correct?
I believe the email says that he will contact the FBI.
Okay. Do you know, either of you had contact with the FBI? Yes or no, to your knowledge?
At the time, no.
Okay. But then you reaffirmed those engineering concerns in an email to Dr. Fauci, which you say the unusual features of the virus make up a really small part of the genome, and that after discussions earlier today, Eddie, Bob, Mike, and myself all find the genome is consistent with expectations from evolutionary theory. Again, were you a conspiracy theorist at that time? And did you share these same concerns on the February 1st conference call? Because Dr. Gary went so far as to say, quote, I really can't think of a plausible natural scenario when you get from the bat virus or one very similar to it, COVID-19, where you insert exactly 4 amino acids, 12 nucleotides, and all have to be added at the exact same time to gain this function. I just can't figure out how this gets accomplished in nature, unquote. So then, within a matter of days, something changed. And that's what this committee is trying to get to the bottom of. What happened within that 3-day period between the conference call and the paper that all of a sudden you did a 180 and it couldn't possibly come from a lab, or maybe, but you're all saying that, you know, this was by sure from nature. What happened in those 3 days?
Well, we examined the genomes more closely. We looked at other coronaviruses, and there was some new data that came. Where did
that data come from?
The scientific literature, you know, the publication of the pangolin genomic sequence showed that there was a receptor binding domain that was very close to the...
And exactly what my colleague here brought up.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
and it was a very important piece of data because it showed that a lot of the theories about, you know, the virus having been engineered or put together in a laboratory were not true, because here was a virus in nature that had a receptor binding domain with exactly the same structure.
I just find it all interesting based on what my other colleague here, the chairman of the committee, said in with reply to the issue of the penguins. But something else that happened between those 2 days is one of your colleagues, who's not here today but was invited, Dr. Rambut, he said, I don't know if I should say this in committee room or not, but given the blank show that this would happen, if anyone seriously accused the Chinese of even accidental release, my feeling is we should say that given there is no evidence of a specifically engineered virus, we cannot possibly distinguish between natural evolution and escape, so we are content with ascribing it to natural processes. His concern was, would he piss off China? That's what his concern was. So look, something happened here. Politicians may flip-flop. Scientists do not flip-flop in a matter of 72 hours. And whether it was the fear of accusing communist China for this leak, whether it was needing to get the FBI involved in what that might lead to down the line, whether it was the fact that millions of US dollars had made their way, by the way, to communist China. Interesting chart I have here, $3.7 million. Were any of you aware during any of these, whether it was drafting this paper or conversations with Fauci, that communist China received $3.7 million of American tax dollars, including to the Wuhan Institute of Virology? Did that ever come up in any conversations with Dr. Fauci?
It did not.
Okay. Dr. Anderson, no?
It did not, and while I was aware of some of the work, I was not aware of the funding going, because that is obviously irrelevant to understanding the origin itself. I should point out, though, that in terms of labeling people as conspiracy theorists, is that considering a potential lab leak is a perfectly reasonable and scientifically justified question to ask. I myself have asked it. I have not called people that believe or think that this could have come from a lab conspiracy theory.
Okay, well, I'd like to just take my time back because I've run out, and I just only want to acknowledge that it's not just Dr. Redfield, right? We had the Department of Energy come out with their conclusion that they believe it was likely from a lab. It is the FBI that also says it was likely for a lab, and I just wanted the record to reflect that. Thank you.
I now recognize